a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. These are not three separate devices. This is one device.
We exist in an incredibly bizarre world where everything is converging. Technology, for instance, now takes features from different areas of functionality, but this convergence also affects media content, where features from one medium is beginning to impact the personality of another.
You think you're the only superhero in the world?
The Marvel Cinematic Universe is an intense example of this. It's a series that adopts the storytelling logic of superhero comics, where the structured imagination exists in a perpetual second act, and is also a networked universe where characters from different genres occupy the same space. But how do you make this work? Different characters from different forms of stories demand different concerns. Joss Whedon has gone on record many times during his directing work for Avengers 1 discussing how these characters by nature have no business occupying the same story.
There's also the element of, okay, you have all these parts, but how can you possibly bring them together? They don't seem to coexist.
How do you project a sense of cohesion when you have a monster created by gamma radiation saving a man who flies around in a robot suit? The answer is simply the Science Bros.
That's nice, Science Bros.
Characterization is crucial for structure because stories are more or less about change, about people wanting something and having it in conflict against the world they inhabit. As Robert McKee said, characterization is the sum of all observable qualities of a human being, everything knowable through careful scrutiny. The totality of these traits make each person unique, and stories often balance the realities and the logic of the world to fit with the uniqueness of the characters in order to produce cohesive themes.
Don't waste your life.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be much meaning to the plot if it doesn't provoke or even have relevance with the character's personal journey. This is especially apparent in films because of the more compressed nature of the medium. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe follows a different type of structure where the world is designed to house stories and realities that can function both individually while also contribute to the development of a wider portrait. Therefore, the simplicity of shaping the storytelling reality around the characterization of individuals is immediately a difficult negotiation, because whatever happens, no matter how diverse and different the characters are, the thematic logic of one character will inevitably impede on the workings of another.
I've always felt that hardware was much more reliable.
For instance, if the Hulk tells a story and shows a world about the terrifying consequences of man's arrogant ambitions with science, then this storytelling reality is technically incompatible with Iron Man because he's someone whose ambitions with science became his salvation. Hulk's central conflict is invalidated by Iron Man if they occupy the same space. So not only why does the Science Bro work, but how does any of this work? How can there be any cohesive theme or sense of logic? The MCU was seemingly conscious of this because it started with Iron Man 1 and The Incredible Hulk in a very upfront way, which are films that immediately share a dialogue with each other despite their radical differences. Iron Man 1 is an improv-driven character drama, and The Incredible Hulk is a tense thriller that evokes moments of body horror. But both films share strong, similar storytelling frames when it comes to being about a character that is a genius, cursed by their own arrogance through a traumatic event, and face an antagonist who wants to steal their powers, which then forces them to come to terms with their new potentials. And if you were to cut out Tony's appearance at the end of The Incredible Hulk, they even end the same way. It's a close-up of the characters achieving self-actualization by coming to terms with their new identities, and thus master the opposites in their lives.
I am Iron Man.
They've very much accentuated patterns that are now symptomatic.
It's good to meet you, Dr. Banner.
Avengers 1 allows these two characters to exist in the same reality by directly officiating this comparable pattern. Their reflective conversation on the helicarrier is not just a fun scene, but is the connective tissue between the two worlds. Tony openly compares how they deal with the difficulties of ownership in their identities.
You know, I've got a cluster of shrapnel trying every second to crawl its way into my heart. This stops it. This little circle of light, it's part of me now. Not just armor.
Bruce argues that the Hulk is a nerve that is exposed and rebukes Tony's position.
Now you see, I don't get a suit of armor. I'm exposed.
This dialogue doesn't just reflect but develops who they are because it progresses their individual struggles with how they grip their identities. Tony is reaffirming his position and Bruce is beginning to move into a different character stage in his. This is a battle of context. And for the grander text itself, by simply having them talk about how it's not comparable, allows them to both be integrated into a place that facilitates both. In other words, the science bros are important because it validates the pattern by turning it into an explicit theme. It thematizes it, which is something I'm going to talk more about in my vision essay, but this friendship is crucial in forming a logic that can accommodate opposing ones. This is particularly critical in Avengers 1 because everyone is fairly segregated. Whenever anyone occupies the same space, they're either arguing or fighting, which in itself is a form of connective tissue, but that's a trick that you can only pull out once. Therefore, the Science Bros and their brief scenes of friendship serves as an important mechanism that makes everything calmingly compatible. It could work without them, but it's just smoother. By having the characters gently talk about their different messages, which are more or less the subtext of their own stories, it involves it and validates it into the workings of the new text itself. This is more or less Marvel's mini-equation when canonizing and mixing new characters and their individual realities into the wider MCU. Peter Parker goes through it.
You can't be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man if there's no neighborhood.
Doctor Strange and even Star-Lord goes through it. They all have scenes that echoes the initial Science Bro scene where they're allowed to thematically reflect each other. Therefore, self-recognition and officiating implicit patterns effectively becomes an important spine of the MCU. It's fascinating how Convergence impacts even something as non-material as themes and characterization in storytelling, because the Science Bros and their success represents a decentralization of themes. Each superhero in the MCU don't represent the answer to a story, but an answer. A possibility as opposed to a certainty. A collection of prospects as opposed to an authoritative conclusion. This is a feature of the superhero genre that is finally being nurtured in films. The comic book structure of no permanent complete endings means we have a franchise of films with no need to discard ideas or dismiss certain themes. Instead, we just have a never-ending stream of development, constantly creating new debates and new dialogues. So, in hindsight, the Science Bros are not just a fun coupling of weird friends, but was very much crucial to the development of the MCU, because just as the characters figured it out, so did the storytelling reality itself.
These are